Nokia wasn't born in the age of digital connectivity. It began in 1865, deep within the Finnish wilderness, as a humble paper mill. This era was defined by industrial grit and physical production, far removed from the circuits of the future. Yet this foundation established a culture of adaptability and Finnish resilience. It's a powerful reminder that even the world's most iconic tech giants often have origins rooted in traditional industries, evolving through generations of change. Before the mobile revolution, Nokia was a sprawling industrial giant. They were into everything: rubber boots, power cables, and consumer electronics. At the time, this diversification felt like strength, a way to anchor the company across multiple sectors of the Finnish economy. But this fragmented identity eventually became a burden. Maintaining focus across such diverse, unrelated fields is difficult, setting the stage for a massive, necessary, and risky strategic narrowing. 1992 marked the most important turning point in Nokia's history. Leadership made the bold, career-defining decision to cut the dead weight and pivot entirely to telecommunications. It was a do-or-die moment that required walking away from established revenue streams. This wasn't just a business change, it was an identity shift. They were betting their entire future on a nascent technology that would soon shrink the world, proving that survival often requires letting go of the past. By the late 90s, Nokia didn't just participate in the mobile market, they defined it. Their strategy of rapid global expansion and diverse product offerings made the brand a household name from Helsinki to Hong Kong. They understood the needs of different markets better than anyone else, effectively putting a phone in every hand. It was the peak of their influence, a time when Nokia was synonymous with mobile communication itself. They were the undisputed kings of the global stage. Nokia's genius was in making technology feel human. They didn't just sell communication, they sold personality. From the legendary durability of their hardware to the addictive simplicity of games like Snake, they created an emotional connection with their users. Their devices weren't just tools, they were companions. This cultural impact created a massive, loyal fan base, cementing Nokia's legacy as a brand that brought mobile technology into the daily lives of millions of people. Success has a way of hiding structural decay. As Nokia expanded, their internal operations became a labyrinth of bureaucracy and conflicting software platforms. While they were busy fighting fires across their massive hardware portfolio, the underlying systems were becoming bloated and difficult to maintain. It was a classic case of corporate inertia. The very size and complexity that brought them power were now slowly stifling their ability to innovate and respond to real-time market demands. Nokia's software, Symbian, was once the standard, but it struggled to evolve alongside the modern internet. It was built for a simpler, pre-smartphone era. As the demand for sophisticated apps and fluid user experiences grew, the legacy architecture hit a hard ceiling. It became increasingly difficult for developers to build on and for Nokia to update. They were trapped by their own success, trying to force a vintage engine to power a vehicle that needed to go much, much faster. 2007 changed the trajectory of the entire industry. When the new standard for computing arrived, it didn't just introduce a better phone, it redefined what a phone could be. Nokia, viewing the world through the lens of hardware specifications and call quality, failed to realize that the market had shifted toward software-centric ecosystems. This wasn't just a product launch. It was an existential threat that exposed the fragility of Nokia's long-standing hardware-first philosophy. Arrogance is often the silent killer of market leaders. When touchscreens emerged, Nokia dismissed them as a niche, impractical trend. They were convinced that their physical keyboards and established design language were what users wanted. They misread the market's desire for intuitive, touch-based software experiences. This fundamental failure to adapt was fueled by a stubborn commitment to the status quo, blinding them to the seismic shift occurring right in front of them. The battleground moved from the hardware specs to the software store. Nokia's rivals were building interconnected worlds of apps, services, and developers that kept users deeply engaged. Meanwhile, Nokia was still treating phones as standalone devices. They failed to understand that the device was merely a gateway to an ecosystem. This shift towards platform-based value left Nokia isolated, struggling to catch up as the power of the phone moved into the cloud and third-party developers. Nokia found itself paralyzed by indecision, stuck between the decaying legacy of its internal systems and the threat of fast-growing external competitors. Leadership couldn't settle on a clear path forward. They were constantly switching strategies, debating whether to adopt established rivals or build their own replacements. This lack of strategic clarity sent a message of instability to the market and confused their loyal customer base, accelerating the loss of their hard-earned momentum. In a famous memo, Nokia's leadership finally admitted the truth. They were standing on a burning platform. The company was losing market share, innovation had stalled, and morale was plummeting. The memo was a desperate call to abandon the old ways, but it was also a stark admission that the company had waited too long to act. The fire was already out of control. It's a chilling case study on how waiting for the perfect moment to pivot can lead to a state of total, frantic crisis. The partnership with a major software player was meant to be the savior, a way to bypass their internal software failures. Instead, it further alienated their remaining user base and failed to gain the necessary traction against the competition. It was a high-stakes gamble that ultimately showcased how difficult it is to merge two vastly different corporate cultures and technology stacks under intense market pressure. It turned out to be a too little, too late move for their mobile division. The numbers did not lie. Once they lost the trust of the market, the decline was swift and unforgiving. The reputation for quality, which had taken decades to build, evaporated in a few short years. It is a harsh lesson in how fast a market leader can fall when the landscape changes and they fail to pivot. The collapse was not just about the loss of sales, it was the loss of relevance. The world had moved on, and Nokia was left scrambling to find a new place in the new reality. The sale of the phone division was a somber conclusion to a monumental era. It signaled the end of a dream that had once felt untouchable. Selling off the very assets that had defined the company for 2 decades was an admission that the strategy of the past simply could not compete with the demands of the future. It was a painful, necessary pruning, marking the death of one chapter of the brand, while quietly leaving the door open for what might come next in a very different industry. Nokia didn't disappear, they transformed. By shifting focus back to the backbone of global connectivity, network infrastructure, they found a path to survive and eventually thrive. They stepped back from the consumer spotlight to become the engineers of the digital world. Their story is a rare example of corporate reinvention. It proves that while you might lose your place at the top of a consumer market, you can find longevity by returning to your core strengths and evolving your purpose.